Hi, Maya. We're here on the occasion of STIMMEN, Voices, your solo exhibition, I think the biggest solo exhibition until now that you have at Villa Stuck. And on this occasion, we're going to talk a little bit about memories and their forms. And I want to start by actually making an observation that maybe would set the tone for our conversation about memories. Memory is recalled when something cannot be registered as history, or to kind of like think about the things that are not made evidence or do not lend themselves to this kind of like forensic study or eyewitness testimony. So it's, I think when we talk about memories, we normally talk about things that are very elusive or very dynamic, that sometimes are hard to grasp or to register. But then, there are also memories that lend themselves to monuments or to narratives, which are forms of sometimes institutional amnesia. And I think that your films really respond to these tensions. How can we grasp something that is in a way elusive or liquid without turning it to a form of deletion, of an institutional forgetfulness? So there is something very nuanced in your work, and I want to, in the conversation we have today, I want to try and develop it a little bit, or to kind of like, think about the different strategies or forms or qualities with which you work. And I want to start by actually asking you about stones, about fossils, about shells, about rust, about lava, about iron balls like the one that are behind us here. All these stuff are very present in all the works we see here at the exhibition. And I want to ask you, how do you address them as materials that are in a way are hard to shape or hard to engrave on, and how do you approach them as materials for memories, these elusive qualities?
Thank you for the question. It's very interesting. Maybe I would begin with I like this idea of the stone, but it came from something just very, very opposite. Is that I began 2006 to 2007 to record some of the stories of my grandmother, talking very in a fragmented way about her own, about a part of her history, and especially saying it with a very fragile way. And for me, it was very interesting to talk to her and to try to follow what she was saying. I mean, of course, I knew some of the story when she was hiding during the Second World War, from hiding from Paris to Marseille and Marseille to Lyon. So all these steps that she was telling, but some of the time, not always. And all these tapes that I recorded from her made something very untouchable, immaterial in some way. And I wanted to make it this memories to materialize them, in a sense that I recorded her. I did one of the first film in the exhibition that you can see in the monitor, adding all fragmented excerpts and trying to do out of this a video film which you could see, which you could follow, and at the end to try to reconstruct her telling, her narration, and so to build a kind of a mini memorial out of that. So this to materialize her memories onto film. So that was the first immaterial, the first try to put something into stone, so to say, into stone. After that, I actually I went to Bratislava and and began to film a lot of different films on memorials, and especially one in Bratislava. I like to film very, very obsessively around one memorial and around one place, and to try to grasp the history of that place, which was a bit difficult because it's a place where people were going back and forth. It's a public place. So, and I knew about the story of these elements, architectural elements, and I tried to grasp also this memory on being obsessive and to to exhaust the place by filming it. So it's also a way to stonify it. So.
Or unstonify it in a way, because I mean, it really struck me when, for instance, when I was looking at the new film, Voices and Shells, and I was thinking about the shell as this kind of like hard material that protect the creature inside it, but through the film, its materiality shifted. It became actually this very kind of like soft and protecting quality, rather than the hard and impenetrable quality that it should maybe have. And I think a lot about the way stones are presented in your work, normally framed by a hand that touch them, that make them more palpable. I mean, there is a sort of softness attached to the stone. So for me, I think the stones in your work are necessarily filmic stones. And which make me also ask, what is the film as material, as an object? Is putting the memory on film making the memory material, or actually dematerialize it?
Yes, probably both. Probably both, because you can as well turn around it, and you can as well see it, but it's like you can also forget it. So then it's again, it's a game with this also, especially because there are not much. I mean, there is a narration, but it's also it's a lot of grasp of excerpts of voices, female voices, and remembrance, and that I had with the place, with a certain place, and so it's also very easy to forget it, and so it just dematerialize after a certain time. So it's probably a game. And also the shells that you see in that film, it makes a reference probably to, the film begins also in the canalizations, and it's a place that is not very well known in the city. But it's a place that also allow us to have feelings of beyond porosity and history of the city, and especially in Munich, which is a bit interesting to know what is through that, who were sent in the Isar, in the water, in the river, and to try to make Lebewesen, some animals or some vegetables, to make them alive, as well as the shells that is empty there, but to make it also to show what is coexisting with us.
Yeah.
So. As well, it is. I mean, it's dematerializing, but it's also something very concrete in the film, I think.
I mean, which add another thing. It's not only materializing, but animating, right? Bring life into these, into these shells. I want to ask you about the sewage canals. That we see in Voices and Shells, the film that was commissioned by Villa Stuck, especially for this exhibition, because in our former rounds of conversation, we talked a lot about the underground, the illegitimate, the illicit, and these are things that. that comes out in some of your works and not in others, but I want you to ask about does the underground as a starting point to evoke certain memories, or the place of the illegitimate memories, or the memories that we try to hide or to forget, or in general, the place of the illicit or illegal in your work.
But that's an interesting point, because it's true that there's this film, Voices and Shells, which begins in the canalizations, but there was also the other film which is completely happening in the catacombs from Rome, and it's also again very underground place. And I was the other day I was thinking of why is always this will to begin the story on this on below the city, and of course I was wondering if it's not because family-wise, actually the father from my grandmother, he was working and hiding all the time during the Second World War. He was hiding my family, and there's something that who made us survive in a way. And I really don't know where it comes from, but there's a very interest in me to grab what is not possible to see in everyday life in a city. So, and to search from this to get it transparent, so to make it transparent.
I mean, one of the things that are invisible and I think your work really captures are ghosts. And it seems while there is a certain movement of people in everyday life which is all about forgetfulness, there are always these ghosts that bring back the past. And in your recent work, I mean, in Voices on Shells, but also in Told Tale, it seems that the voice is being represented. Sorry, the ghost is being represented through the voice. Can you say a little bit about your work with voices and how you use them in this kind of like ghostly matter?
Yes, it's very interesting because since I don't really use a very common narration and have this remembrance of sentences of some person or some topics by especially by poets that I know, or by interviews that I heard, and by it's a way I really use these voices of that I remember, and then try to put them in a sense that it begins a sentence, and then the rest will be written by a mute film, or I will write it myself in the film. But it really brings this narration effect a bit more alive. So that's the first. I think it's a very important narrative purpose for me, since I don't have this normal narration. Probably.
I mean, it's interesting. I was thinking about narrative when I rewatched some of the work, and I thought that, what is interesting for me in your work, that it doesn't consist through, a structure, as you said, like the classical narrative, but actually through qualities. And in that sense, the films are like sculptures. When you and I started the conversation between us, we were talking about, about public space, about urban space, about how public space in its always happening, ever occurring, in a way rewrites monument or even resist the monumental. But this time when I looked at the films the way they're organized in this exhibition, I really saw them as sculptures, in the sense that this is like an amalgamation of qualities and of objects and of materials that are set together. Can you talk a little bit about the process of composing what I called filmic sculptures?
Yes. That's. I mean, if we see it here just behind us, that's maybe one of the examples that we could talk about. Because this film, actually, I have been invited in Les Milles. It's a very small village in south of France, between Aix-en-Provence and Marseille. And this place was a former camp where the French army used to imprison the foreigners first. And first of all, it was a brick fabric, and the center of the village also. And on this center of the village, there's one square, and one square where there is a monument. It's just a soldier, which is like leaning on his munition bags and or sandbags, and well, probably dying, and stands there for three wars: the first, the second, and the Algerian-French war. And so, in this village, I wanted to do a film, which actually I wanted first to do a film inside of the site memorial, which is a museum today, and they didn't allow me to film inside because they didn't want to have any fictions. So I decided, so with these restrictions allowed me to get out of this place, which was a very good thing, and to turn around the village and try to find the traces of the past in this village, because there is a lot. The whole village is noted. I mean, the names of the streets, they all have a reference to the Second World War, which is very heavy. And a real kind of, I mean, this village. And there's this bull player, this pétanque player. And so at the end, you know, it's a film about the village, but it's a film which shows this square and these people. And I ended it to present it with this sand to extend the actual or the virtuality of the film, or the unmateriality of the film, into something very material in this sense. I mean,
very palpable, very
tactile.
Yeah, very tactile.
And to come up with, I mean, there's a dysfunctionment between the sand or the keys, in English, and the bulls that I disposed on the floor. Which are from the 1920s. So there's a distance between the space and the time. So, and that could be a kind of a sculpture in the sense of the village and extending it into the real room, the actual room.
I mean, actually, this film, I mean, I was referring to amalgamation, right? The idea that, you know, different objects cohabitate the space. I mean, there is one image that I really remember. I mean, there are a few images of inscriptions here, even we see one of them now. And in one of them, some of the inscriptions are scratched, some of them have rust on them. And for me, it was this really interesting extension of the kind of cohabitation that happened between the ball players, the putain players, and the sculpture. This kind of dialogue across time or across the animate and inanimate. And I want to, I mean, you know, thinking of this like animating power, in many of the films we have all these close-ups on hands. I referred to them earlier when I said that, you know, the stones are always like framed by a hand to hold them and to kind of like, you know, make them palpable to us. But in general, like hands is a recurring thing. I mean, you talked earlier on Pass On, Take One, the film that you shot with your grandmother. What we see are hands, her hands with the nail polish, but also women holding their children hands, women hands going through clothes or stuff in like a flea market. There is this beautiful shot from I Am an Archaeologist also of a hand like touching a stone. We see hands in almost all the films. In Voices and Shells, the new commission film, there is this very interesting montage of hands holding stuff, in painting, in sculptures, but also real hands holding shells or drawing this spiral. Can you say something about this gesture of the hands?
The hands really helps you to speak a lot. There's the hand that you have when, if you say transmission, or by passing down frame one, the first film you were referring on, is actually the first thing that you give when the hand of your kid, how you transmit history, or how you transmit memory. Yeah. So that's the first very, very basic gesture that there was, or that was. I tried I really worked on passing down frame one, and then as we told earlier, this really tactile wish or desire to touch something that could bring something which materialized the memory, so that at least memory becomes something haptic, tactile, and we can kiss it, we can get it close to it, and also there is always, for what there is the will to make an extension of the camera, so it's like something that
in a way the hand breaks the gesture of the hand breaks this cinematic gesture of observing or creating a screen, and in a way the hand I don't know if break, but it kind of like continue this gesture, or it prevailed the screen as a surface. Yes.
It's also something, if you see the 3D films where you see the objects and then you always will to touch it, and this is very simple.
I think also that hands are always representative of some sort of labor, some sort of work. In your films, this work is mostly very soft. The hands are holding softly the thing that they touch. But I'm also thinking about, especially in Voices and Shells, we have quite a few less soft hands. If you can talk a little bit about this montage of the statue and the painting of these more didactic hands, or more decisive hands, or maybe it's my interpretation and you don't see it there. Because hands can be also rough. They can be didactic, they can be indicative, they can be instructional.
Yes, they have their own character.
Yeah.
It's true. But there, it's difficult because I use this. I use these hands as a cinematographic object, obviously, which brought because at a certain point of the film, which is called Voices and Shells, you have these voices which are not only the voices of the female voices, but there is a voices in French you can say voices your like a vote. It's also kind of you give your voice and you give your advice, or you in the film there's also that paper that being held by the sculpture, and which is then thrown by the official in the film, the footage. So you see all this paper, which is the tracts for which she has been killed. And after this paper comes into the street, into the reality, that it falls down in the street, and then it's being glued on the wall, and then you have these images of Hanau, the attacks from the NSU, and so it's a real passing over, and so that's might be didactic, or at least, but it's just to help the passage to make it clearer. Probably.
I mean, and I think about the paper, because what I like about is that at the end we also see the posters that were stitched on the wall, but then were wrapped. You know, so this partiality that I think is always present in all of your work. You know, there is always the enigmatic part, the part that allows some forgetfulness, because some forgetfulness is actually generative for memory work. I like how when you describe l'atoll mer, the starfish, you talk about how the film is a film about forgetfulness, and every time we go into the water, every descendance is like another moment of forgetfulness. Maybe to end with that, I mean, what is forgetfulness for you? I mean, how do you see it in your work or in the way you try to approach memories?
Mm-hmm. So, it's a good question. Well, I mean, for me it was difficult to work suddenly. I mean, it was not difficult. It was a very a good goal to change. I mean, to take the opposite, which is, I don't know if it's really the opposite, but to work on forgetfulness, I really decided to change completely the milieu, the environment, to take fluidity, to take, I mean, I speak very metaphoric now, but just to have this flow of fluidity, which is the water, and to just to try to, get completely in another milieu and forget about the materiality of it, which is, I mean, water is also a materiality. I mean, it's fluidity, something different. But and there, for me, to work on that, and then to play with the navigation, and then to add more and more images. So that the multitude of images makes you forget the one before, and so that was a game a bit of working on that film, making me think of Annie Ernaux when she was writing. I mean, when she's writing very spontaneously all her thoughts, it's like also she has so many pictures on the table, and then it's getting too much so that she forgets. I mean, and so it's a very simple
it's a beautiful way to describe this film, because I thought that, I think this one is like, it's a very beautiful, this kind of like masses of images that make us forget, but in a very productive way, in a very poetic way, in a lyrical way. Thank you very much, Maya. Do you want to maybe say a few words of thanks before we end?
Yes, I wanted to thank you, all the team. Thank you, Laliv, for coming. Thank you very much to the Village Talk, Michael Bos, Sabine Schmidt, who invited me for the show, and a big thank you to her and all of the team who helped to build the show.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks,
and all
Maya.
for the public.